So good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and welcome to the Sunday service for the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast. And if there's somebody watching this morning or anytime during the week that's never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. And this morning, to begin our service, my wife, Becky, who's a practitioner emeritus, will open us with a prayer, and then Barb Loftus, who's going to do a reading for us.
Okay, so I just invite all of us as we prepare for this morning's opening prayer. I invite everybody to just go into that place of gratitude, this place where it opens our hearts, fills us with this joy, with infinite presence, power, and love, and peace. And taking in some deep breaths and releasing it, reminding each of us that as we breathe in and breathe out, it is this divine power's breath that we breathe in and we breathe out, reminding us that we are spiritual beings in this human experience. And just recognizing this wonderful infinite presence and power that is always filling us up and always expanding through each of us. It is always here. It is omnipresent, all-powerful. And so as we again just feel this gratitude, this expansion in our hearts, I'm knowing my oneness in this divine power, that it is always within me. And I'm knowing this for each person who's viewing this right here and now. And in this powerful realization of knowing our oneness in divine spirit, I'm knowing for each one of us that this divine presence is really filling us up with its love, with this infinite love, bringing our awareness to this place right here and now, not in the future, not in the past, but in this moment. And in this moment, we realize our oneness, not only in this wonderful infinite love, but with one another, that we realize there is no separation, no boundaries, only love, only healing. And so in this place of infinite love, I'm also realizing for everybody in the Ukraine, this infinite loving presence is right there in the midst of what's happening. That each one of us is realizing for them the peace, the love, the healing. That in spite of any kind of appearance, we know the truth for them. And we can also know the truth for each one of us, remembering this divine presence. This divine presence is also within Reverend Dr. Ron. And I'm knowing that his message this morning reaches out, touching everybody's hearts, bringing their awareness to that one point of truth. And so for all of this and so much more, I just let it be. I release it, just knowing that this is God's word in action. Give thanks. Just let it be, and so it is.
So it is.
Morning, everyone. Those of you who are familiar with the Christian observances may know that Lent began this Wednesday, March 2nd, and ends the Thursday before Good Friday. When I was a young child and first heard of Lent, I thought folks were saying Lent, and it confused me. What did Lent have to do with religion? Then shortly after, I discovered my mistake. It wasn't Lent, it was Lent. Oh, okay. But then I wondered, what was Lent? By whom and to whom and why? Was whatever was Lent ever to be returned? Not coming from a family that observed Lent, whatever it was, I accepted my confusion and forgot all about it until now. The Christians observe Lent as a precursor to Easter, and the practice is associated with the 40 days and 40 nights Jesus spent in the wilderness after his baptism, when he faced his temptations and Satan. To me, this was Jesus's shamanic quest. In modern terms, I think of it as a spiritual spring cleaning, a time to pull all the parts of one's life off the shelf and decide, does this bring me joy or serve me in any way? It's time to release, and mourn if necessary, those things to which the answer is no. It's time to contemplate what one wants to do with the empty space left behind one's life's closet cleaning. Or maybe it's time to allow the empty spaces to remain and enjoy the simplicity now created. I will be observing Lent this year by doing a deep spiritual spring cleaning. I choose to eat a very limited diet, drink nothing but water, allowing for a little lemon or lime, walk on the beach, and journal. The point, though, is to pause and take stock of life, however one chooses to do it, however one does their spring cleaning. So maybe as a young child, I had it right from the beginning. Lent is about Lent, spiritual Lent.
Thank you. That was really great.
Yeah.
So before I get into my message here, I have to tell you, we were out with some friends this week, and one of them is a practicing Catholic. And we were talking about Lent and what people were going to give up. And so I kind of suggested to Becky that Becky ought to give up chocolate. And I can't even describe the reaction that she had, but she almost went through the roof of my car. So I guess she's not giving up chocolate for Lent. Anyway, so I'm going to speak about judgment today. And my title is Here Comes the Judge. But you know, sometimes when they have a movie series, they go back. I think they did this with Star Wars, and they have a prequel. So I want to begin today with a prequel to the message, because I want to start with a story, but I read it after I had prepared pretty much the whole message for today. But to me, it's relevant. It's a story you'll see about judgment. And the story is about a man who is at the mall waiting for his wife. His wife is inside and he's outside, and he's polishing his car, wiping his car down. And as he's doing it, he sees somebody approaching him that he said in our society today would refer to them as a bum. Somebody who had no car, no home, no clean clothes, no money. And he thought to himself, I hope he doesn't come over and ask me for money. And the fellow didn't come over and ask him for money. He just sat on a curb nearby where there was a bus stop, and he was watching this fellow wipe down his car. And after a while, he said to him, that's a really pretty car. And the fellow said, thank you, and continued to wipe down his car until he heard a voice say, ask him if he needs help. And at first he didn't, but then he gave in to the voice, and he said to the fellow, do you need any help? And he wrote, the fellow answered me with 3 simple words that touched me deeply. And the words were, don't we all? And he reached down into his pocket and he gave him enough money for the bus if he needed it, for a meal, for a place to stay. And he said, you know, those words still ring true to me. No matter how much you have, no matter what you've accomplished, we all need help. And he said, you know, maybe that man was just a homeless stranger, or maybe he was sent by a power great and wise. He said, maybe God called an angel, dressed him like a bum, and said, go down and minister to that man wiping his car. He needs help. Don't we all? So once again, the title today is Here Come the Judge. And I want to begin with a quote from Ernest Holmes, who said, in the long run, no one judges us but ourselves, and no one condemns us but ourselves. You know, ever since we started taking prac class, I've always thought that the biggest issue most of us deal with is judgment, because we do it all the time. Most of us, we judge all the time. And you know, most of us know that that on some level we should accept everybody for the divine being that they are, yet we have a difficult time believing or actually living what we believe. It's so easy to fall into the judgment trap. So why do we do it? You know, and I think there's a whole host of reasons why we do. You know, one of them, and I think it's the most obvious, we point out in other people what we don't like in ourselves. So if there's a part of us that we're not content or we're not happy with, when we see somebody else expressing it, we get right to judgment. And you know, when we judge people, we don't see the whole person. We stay fixed on one characteristic or one trait that we point out. And we think by putting somebody else down, we're defending ourselves. And the reality is, because we can't see our own divinity, our own godliness, we can't see it in somebody else. And perhaps when we learn to be more loving and more compassionate to ourselves, we'll be able to do it to the other people in our life. Wayne Dyer once wrote that true nobility isn't about being better than anybody else. It's about being better than you used to be. And I love that. He's telling us that life isn't about competing or struggling with somebody else. Life is about becoming the best person that we could possibly be. It's about knowing we all walk a path with many lessons to learn, and we need to be gentle with everybody in the great classroom of life. Let me give you another quote from Ernest Holmes. He said, an evolved soul judges no one, condemns no one, but realizes we're all on the road of experience, seeking the same goal, and that each must ultimately find his home in heaven. Cherie Carter Scott is a PhD psychologist, and she writes on spiritual topics. And she wrote in one of her books, she said, our growth as human beings is a process of experimenting and trial and error. And eventually, if we're open to it, the process leads us on a path of wisdom. And I thought when I read that, she's right. And sometimes we win and sometimes we lose. But we can all look at our mistakes as an opportunity to learn. Emerson said it. He said, every calamity is a spur and a valuable hint. Every situation that we're in is an opportunity to evolve further along on our divine spiritual path. So I think it's pretty difficult to do a message on judgment without talking about forgiveness. And so I want to talk about two kinds of forgiveness: self-forgiveness and forgiving others. And so I want to read to you something about self-forgiveness. And it's in the book, Guilt is the Teacher, Love is the Lesson by Joan Borisenko. And in there, she quotes a vignette from P.L. Travers, who wrote about this in Parabola magazine. And it's the story of a woman who's dimly aware of another woman who's dressed in a long blue veil at the edge of her awareness. And this is what he wrote. We stood there facing each other, vibrant in the expectant stillness, the forest bird song suddenly silent. And then she thrust a hand under her veil and drew it down from head to shoulder, her face emerging as the moon slips out of the edge of a cloud. It was my face, and I knew it had always been. Forgive me, she said. I am what I am. As she spoke, her veil slithered to the ground, revealing a white underground that was tucked and puckered and stained with living. Looking down, I saw that my robe was equally touched and puckered and stained. The same face, the same garments, the other aspect of myself. And I had rejected it, believing in my ignorance that I could go on my pilgrimage unshadowed and alone. And he ends it with this: arms wide, we bent toward each other, and a passing angel paused for a moment, standing imponderately on the air to witness our embrace. Wherever there are two, there are three, he smiled at us benignly. May that third, the one that reconciles unnameable, not to be seen or known, in mercy, forgive you both. And the point of that, if it's not obvious, is we need to accept all of ourselves. We need our shadows, and they need us. Paul Ferrini wrote a wonderful book on forgiveness. It's a tiny little book called 12 Steps of Forgiveness. And he says in there, I can't change you. Therefore, I either accept you as you are, or I lose my peace. When we judge others, we disturb our peace. And he writes in there 3 ways to peace that I want to share with you. And the first one is accept yourself as you are. You're okay with all of your problems, with all of your pains, and with all of your preoccupations. You don't have to change anything. And you know what? When I read that, one of the things that I thought about was there's a great irony in that, because when we don't accept ourselves, and we have parts of us that we're embarrassed, ashamed of, don't like, whatever it is, if somebody discusses with us or tries to change us, we our ego gets involved and we get defensive. But the fact is, when we really learn to become centered and love and accept all of us, that's when we can change. His second point is accept others as they are. They're okay, and you don't need to do anything to change them. And his third point is accept your life as it is right now. You don't have to change anything about it. And why don't you have to change anything about it? Because everything that happens, every lesson enables us to grow. You know, when we can't accept something, we oppose it, and that leads to bondage. The path to acceptance leads to peace. Peace allows us to experience our divinity. And when we experience our divinity, we realize there's no separation. You know, disagreement can be a gift for us. It teaches us that we could dig deeper. You know, wouldn't it be great? Just think about this. Wouldn't it be great? And I know I can't do this. Sometimes I can, but not all the time. If when we have a conflict, we looked for points of connection rather than winning or losing. So I read an article this week by a doctor named Lisa Rankin, and the title of the article was The Difference Between Judgment and Discernment. So want to share with you how the article begins. He cheated on his wife with a younger woman. She abandoned her infant baby. He drinks until he beats his children. She killed him. He raped her. She sells her body for money. He sells drugs to teenagers. Lisa wrote, we might judge all of these people. Probably most of us would judge all of them. She said, spiritual, and this is coming from an MD. She said, spirituality is withholding judgment, trusting that we're all on a journey to learn what the lessons are. And she makes the point, this doesn't mean we condone their behavior. But what if we see them as suffering beings and we offer them love and compassion instead? You know, I think social scientists have found this. People who get hurt. Most people that abuse spouses and loved ones have been abused. And when I was thinking about this week, it reminded me years ago, I saw an interview on TV with somebody who was on death row. And the person that was interviewing asked him to talk about his childhood. And I never forgot this. He recalled an incident when he was a young boy, when his dad put him on top of the dresser and said, jump into my arms. And he did. And his dad caught him. And his dad did it again. They did it 3 times. He jumped and his dad caught him. The 4th time when he jumped, his dad stepped aside and let him hit the ground. And when he turned over, he said, let that be a lesson for your life. Never trust anybody. That's how he grew up, being hurt. And so he hurt. Reverend John Watson said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. And Lisa, I just want to touch one more thing. She talks about the difference between discernment and judgment. And she said, judgment says you are bad, so I don't love you. Discernment says, I love you, and I choose to set boundaries to limit my exposure to you. Here's the difference. Judgment closes the heart. Discernment allows us to stay open, but with clear boundaries. Pema Chodron once wrote, if we learn to open our hearts, anybody, including people who drive us crazy, can be our teachers. So I talk about Jack Kornfield every once in a while because I think he's a wonderful teacher. And he said in Buddhism, Buddhists regard life as precious. And one way they reflect on the preciousness of life is to reflect on their death. And so Kornfield said, here's a simple exercise. Look across your entire life. So you know what? We'll do this. If you don't, close your eyes for a second. And I hadn't thought about doing this, but close your eyes and bring to mind 2 good deeds you've done. 2 good deeds you've done. And just remember, they don't have to be huge. They can be very simple. Let me give you a couple of examples that he gives. Some children told their dad they love him before he died. A teacher said that she's an elementary school teacher. When a child is having a bad day or seems sad, she hugs him. Guy said when he's driving and looking for a parking space, if he sees somebody else behind him looking, he'll pass up the space and give it to them. And one other person wrote when she was 6 years old, somebody knocked on their door, an elderly couple looking for a tow, and they asked if they could borrow a phone before cell phones. And when their parents let the couple in, this little girl went and made tea and sandwiches for them. The thing that matters most don't have to be grand or fantastic. There are moments when we touch one another, when we're caring. I heard this story this week about Mother Teresa. It's a perfect example of this. She was giving a tour to a guy who was very wealthy and had donated a lot of money to her works. And so she was giving him a tour of her facility in India. And as they were walking, they came upon somebody who had this horrendous open wound that was festering and full of pus. And the person that I heard tell the story, Mother Teresa, called for some medicine, and she bent down and cleaned out all the pus and the festering junk that was in there. And then she bandaged him up all the time with this guy watching. And as she completed it, and they started on the tour again, he turned to Mother Teresa and he said, I wouldn't do that for $1 million. And she said to him, neither would I. It wasn't about anything but touching the heart. It comes from the heart. At the end of people's life, people don't ask, how much money do I have in the bank? How many books did I write? What did I build? They ask, did I love well? Did I live fully? Did I learn to let go? So I want to close with these words from Dan Millman, who wrote, the universe does not judge us. It only provides consequences and lessons and opportunities to balance and learn through the law of cause and effect. Compassion is the recognition that we are each doing the best we can within the limits of our current beliefs and capacities. God bless you. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful week.